was that when fossil fuel prices are high, then what you can do is adopt solar because that's the cheapest energy source now, and that conserves more of your domestic fossil fuel production. So then you can either save it or you can sell it. And it's projected in the US CO2 emissions could go up 28% by 2030 if all the data centers were done as currently planned versus having no data centers at all.
Certainly, creating a warm and engaging narrative for your podcast, consider Great Tell Me as a suggestion that combines an upbeat and inviting spirit without any background music. Welcome to Tangelic Talks, your go-to podcast from Tangelic, where we dive into the vibrant world of clean energy, development, sustainability, and climate change in Africa. We bring you inspiring stories, insightful discussions, and groundbreaking innovations from the continent making waves in the global community. Tune in and join the conversation toward a brighter, greener future. Let's get started.
Welcome to Tangelic Talks, a podcast at the intersection of energy, equity, and empowerment with your co-hosts Victoria Cornelio and Andres Tamez. And in today's episode, we've got our very own Charles. Welcome, Charles.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Can you please tell people who you are? Because we know you already. Charles is part of the Tangelic team. We're very excited to get to chat to him.
Yeah, I'm Charles F. Stromeyer IV, and I'm the principal frontier AI and investment strategy at Tangelic. And I have over 30 years experience in investing in an AI. Wow. And I took my first two AI courses actually in 1992 when I was an undergrad. So it's actually been around a lot longer than most people think.
Yeah. I think there was someone who was shocked the other day when I said algorithms are AI and they've been around for however long. What was AI like in the 1990s? What was it being used for?
It was used for things like trying to predict, market fluctuations. Like in quantitative finance, they were using artificial neural networks, but they were very primitive. This is before what we call deep learning AI or the transformer architecture, which came out of Google in 2017, but was then launched as GPT in 2018 by OpenAI.
That's crazy. And how did you find yourself in this world? What attracted you to get into this field of work?
Well, the two courses I took were very interesting. The two ones in AI at Oberlin College in 1992. And then I was at a scientific conference in 2004, and I met this guy who had developed a new kind of AI system at MIT. And that's really when I got interested in it again.
Okay, so it tracks back then.
Yeah.
Why would it be useful to have before and after data?
Well, I'll give you two examples. Data centers, as you know, use a lot of energy and water, and they emit CO2 and generate noise. So I was a Mass Challenge mentor for OptiCloud, and they're the first to use AI agents to optimize cloud computing. You can think of it like your spam email. There's a lot of digital waste in there. They can find all the digital waste in cloud computing and re-optimize it. So
Wow.
That's a software solution. And then a hardware solution that I really like is a new startup from two MIT researchers called Fervorit. And they have a liquid cooling solution for data centers that doesn't use any water. And it's much more energy efficient. So you can get 35% more tokens out of an AI model. And the neat thing about it is it could enable data centers in places that it wasn't previously feasible, like Africa, the Middle East, or parts of America, where there just isn't enough water for data center cooling.
Yeah.
And so the before and after would matter. In this case, if you wanted to demonstrate a reduction in CO2 emissions from a data center, you could measure before when the data center is running and then after the intervention, either software and or hardware.
How does the data center directly emit CO2?
It's because of electricity demand going up from the data center. It uses all kinds of electricity, like it'll burn natural gas or coal, and it's projected in the U.S. CO2 emissions could go up 28% by 2030 if all the data centers were done as currently planned versus having no data centers at all.
Can these satellite technologies also be used to measure, for example, I've seen stats about the uh, the farm the data center AI data center that Kevin O'Leary wants to build, and the the projected increases in both daytime and nighttime temperature in the local area. Would those also be able to be measured by satellite?
I think they would be, yeah. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
an expert on that though, so I'd have to look
Gotcha.
into it. But
Right,
the
because that seems like
satellites,
something that could also be it. Mm-hmm.
yeah, the satellites can also measure deforestation and crop disease.
The AI would basically accelerate and help you understand what's going on a little bit better.
Right.
Fine
A-
tune. Okay.
And there's other ways AI can help, like predictive AI with early warning systems for floods, for example, for better weather monitoring.
Yeah.
There's also precision agriculture. So I was once a mentor for a company called Auto Agronom, and they developed technology that uses sensors and tensiometers to listen to the needs of the roots of plants. And by optimizing when you feed and water them, you use much less fertilizer and water. So that would be one. Another is digital twins and urban modeling. You can model cities and see how they might respond to rising sea levels, for example. And then more generally, global monitoring platforms like what I just mentioned with satellites.
That's really cool. So it kind of helps us get ahead of the issues we might be facing down the line.
Yeah, hopefully.
Hopefully.
Is this a product of modern AI, or is this just a product of like how different is modern AI from like just deep learning and machine learning in the past? Is it more dynamic and that's why it helps us more than traditional modes of like this sort of computing?
It's mostly due to the transformer architecture. I don't want to get too technical, but GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Now, arguably, there were large language models in the 1990s, like they beat people at the game Jeopardy.
Okay,
You
yeah.
might remember that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really till the transformer architecture that things took off. And the token usage by large language models is very important. You can think of a token as like a bit of text or data,
Okay.
and or as a unit of intelligence as far as these AI models go.
No, it was similar to that. Is it because there is so much more data available that we can make these technologies, I guess, better at predicting? Or are we implementing them differently?
It's a mixture of both. The big data or large data sets certainly helps with making more accurate predictions.
And then I guess tying that into, for example, ESG tracking, if you're able to do before and after accurate measures, would that help improve, for example, the reputation of a company or help fight greenwashing in some way? Because you've got some hard evidence of how things go following the articles in the European Union and things like that. Like, is that one of the benefits of having a before and after?
Yeah, but I don't want to sound Pollyannish that finance or tech can solve all our climate problems. Lisa Sachs at Columbia University just had a paper out, and I don't remember the title of the paper, but I could look it up. She argues there's three main types of climate risks. There's planetary, which is things physical like rising sea levels. There's economic, which is reduced economic production or productivity, for example. And there's financial, which would be like credit quality or stock sell-offs because of the impact. So part of the problem with the banks committing earlier to zero carbon and then reneging is these different types of climate risks, they didn't map well onto their objectives.
Which is sort of defeats the point of making that commitment. if you're going to
Take it
renege on
back.
it just because it doesn't align with your objectives. That's sort of, but it really is a great indication of the cultural state of things.
Yeah, and there's an old saying that impact investing is kind of like a houseboat. It's neither a great house nor a great boat. This is
Yeah.
because of the tension between wanting to make a positive impact versus needing to make a profit.
Yeah. Is this a tension that we see a lot in climate tech in general?
Yeah, because initially with climate tech, there's various barriers to getting it to the communities that need it most. And one of those is the high upfront capital costs of doing a big solar project or a wind farm, for example. There's the high initial price for consumers for certain of them. Like in Africa, you can do pay as you go solar, and that works well, but EVs are expensive. But
Yeah.
because of the Iran war, there's a lot of interest in cheap EVs from China going to other parts of Asia and even Africa.
Mm.
And then there's an uneven playing field because fossil fuels have a lot of heavy subsidies and even indirect subsidies that support them.
So it's sort of, yeah, it's sort of very unfair. Although like how would the subsidies for green, for example, energy or alternatives differ from the ones for fossil fuel?
Well, you look at the leader in clean energy, it's China, and they do industrial subsidies and other techniques to favor and prop up their industry. And for example, from about mid-March to mid-April, the total volume of solar panel exports from China roughly doubled. A lot of that went to Asia and Africa, led by Nigeria. And once I told the finance minister of Nigeria that a good strategy that I had thought of in 2008, and I told her later at the Africa Business Conference at Harvard Business School, was that when fossil fuel prices are high, then what you can do is adopt solar because that's the cheapest energy source now, and that conserves more of your domestic fossil fuel production.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can either save it or you can sell it at the higher export price. So that's not a direct subsidy, but it's a way that even clean energy can help conserve fossil fuels.
Absolutely, it can help you keep it as either an economic reserve or as just for in case of emergency.
Yeah.
Right. Or you can use less at home so there's less pollution, or you can sell it at the export price, which is much higher than the domestic price. This is for net exporters of fossil fuels like Nigeria.
I guess a lot of people, when they hear fossil fuels, they think it's extremely contradictory to the green space and renewables and things like that. Is there something we're missing when it comes to these things? Is that sort of a knee-jerk reaction?
I don't think it's entirely an unjustified reaction because global emissions and temperatures are at relative highs,
Mm-hmm.
and they're projected to go higher. So, but one thing with clean energy myths that people have about it is it's not a guaranteed 100% clean silver bullet. Like there's heavy resource extraction. So for batteries and solar and wind, you have to have lithium, cobalt, and rare earth metals. And 90% of the rare earth metals come from China.
Mm.
And there's complex supply chains and there's infrastructure updates.
Yeah, so the production of it isn't necessarily scot-free.
Yeah, but that said, another myth is that EVs are powered by dirty electric grids because they're powered by natural gas or coal. But in the long run, transitioning to EVs is much less carbon intensive than maintaining internal combustion engine vehicles.
Right, okay.
Oh, the good news about this is that there's something called Moore's Law, which says that the power of semis, rough conductors or computer chips, roughly doubles every year, and the cost comes down proportionally.
Okay.
Well, with solar, it's been even quicker than that, and with batteries, it's been even quicker than solar. So the idea that renewables cost more just isn't feasible anymore because solar's the cheapest global energy source, and we now have smart grids and batteries that can handle it. At least with sophisticated electric grids, they know how to incorporate it.
Is it specifically talking at a mass scale, like a company or a country, or household finances, like having solar in your house?
It depends on if there's net metering. So if I, like in my neighborhood, well, we're on an independent power company, but if I was on a grid, like here in the northeast of the US, and I had solar and I generated excess electricity, I could sell it back to the utility and save money that way.
Okay. So it is becoming more affordable overall.
Yeah, and it goes back also in the developing world to what you said about ESG benefits. For example, when a household in Africa gets solar for the first time or clean cooking, then the women and girls don't have to spend as much time collecting firewood. They can study more, they can work more, they get more free time.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that in the black and white conversation of energy kind of get lost sometimes of it's not just about, being able to turn on the lights is the knock-off effect of having access to these, being powered into the grid or having some energy independence is how it frees up your social life as well. I want to focus a little bit on finance from a perspective of climate technology sounding very promising, but then where does the funding and scalability come in? Because, like you said, it's hard to get it to the people that need it most. But isn't that true of most charity projects, right? Getting them funded and scaled.
Well, the reality is most startups and nonprofits fail. And so part of it is that scalability issue. How do you climb the valley of death for clean tech startups? There's, depending on the type of startup, for example, with an impact or circular economy startup in Africa, you have to scale it with both public and private sector resources. It's not sufficient to scale it just privately unless it's truly some kind of breakthrough technology that just pays for itself.
Okay.
But that's a general problem, especially in the US, is the clean tech valley of death, where you get some funding, you build a prototype, it works, but then scaling it economically.
In the climate space, is the priority then environmental impact or commercial viability?
It depends on the region. That's one of the barriers to getting clean energy to people who need it is uncertainty and fragmented regulation and trade tariffs.
Oh, right. Okay.
Um, yeah, because with uncertainty, it's harder to finance a long-term project. And as you can imagine, Trump in the US is now promoting more coal. So, but thankfully, a recent project in the US just raised 3.5 billion for solar and batteries. So it's still doable. And the really good news here in the US, it was widely covered on the news yesterday. For the first time ever, consumers are now getting more electricity from solar than from coal.
Oh,
Oh,
wow. That is good
I did not
news.
know that. Not in the U.S. I didn't figure that. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
And the other thing is, there's more emphasis now on nuclear. Now, the leader in nuclear in the US is the US and EU, but China's catching up. They recently are building or have built 6 new large nuclear reactors. So it's predicted by the end of the decade they'll be the leader in nuclear power. But global warming's a global issue, so every little bit helps.
Yeah. When it comes to, I believe by year they are on track to beat out everyone else when it comes to nuclear, and that'll be a pretty good chunk of their advantage over the entire world in having very very stable, uh, clean energy. Mhm.
Yeah, here in the US, there's some emphasis on larger nuclear, but there's a lot more recently on small modular nuclear reactors. And I was once a mass challenge vendor for Oklo, which now trades on the stock market under the symbol OKLO. And One thing they're doing is they just announced a 1.7 billion private center for recycling spent nuclear waste into new nuclear fuel.
Right? Because newer tech reactors can use all of the fuel. Like it can use the primary fuel and then the waste from it to keep itself sort of going, right?
Yeah, it's also they might have the potential to create tritium, which is needed by Commonwealth fusion systems. They're the most prominent commercial fusion project in the US.
Because like I feel like when it comes to nuclear, like I'm very close to it. I love nuclear energy, and the this is like sort of the silver lining to the mass implementation of AI data centers in the United States, that they've reactivated the conversation and this year updated a lot of the legislation about nuclear, right? Do you feel like this will get America more back on track? Is like the timelines. What used to happen with nuclear in the United States is that the timelines and the regulations would make it so that it just wasn't viable uh, in a way, in a proper way, right? So now that we're seeing all of these small form factor modular nuclear reactors sort of being the main discussion, where do you think they're going to be implemented? Or like, do you see it realistically, like having multiple reactors going online, maybe like one to, uh, I guess it's more on the timeline of 4 to 5 years from now.
Yeah, that's the current plan, and they get activated on government and military sites initially. Uh, but that's a very important debate now is how economically feasible will scaling up small modular reactors be versus traditional large nuclear power plants. And I'm not convinced anyone really knows yet.
Is nuclear an energy source that could be adapted in other places in the world?
It could be, but there was a recent report that, to give you an example, if we installed more renewables, that would do more for climate change than any direct air capture scheme, because that's not very economical either. And the advantage Africa has, the whole continent of Africa, they have 60% of the world's best solar potential,
Mhm.
but they only have 1% of installed capacity. So I mentioned the startup Fervorit. What you could do in theory, we don't know yet if it'll scale, but you can make a solar powered data center for Africa or the Middle East, and it wouldn't need any water for cooling with the liquid cooling alternative that Fervorit has.
How does the liquid cooling alternative work? Do you know? Like I just
Yeah, they submerge it in a special kind of liquid, and unlike other liquid cooling systems, it has much smaller bubbles, which are much more efficient for heat transfer. This is emerging, that's on the surface of the servers themselves.
This is weather specific to where the center is.
Yeah, traditionally you couldn't build a large data center in the Middle East, Africa, or say Arizona because there's no water to cool it with.
Yeah, I was wondering, the reason I ask is because a lot of climate solutions are developed, and then one of the issues I've seen with scalability is the context specific discussion of these technologies. So, for example, you can't import the same technology to every place, right? A lot of the solutions have to be specific to context.
Right, it depends on the locality. For example, in the leading science journal Nature, there's recently a news article about there's going to be a lot more gullies in Africa. These are where there's not a lot of underground infrastructure and the rain suddenly forms
Okay.
and creates a gully in the ground. So all these things, these weather and climate and environment specific things have to be planned for before you do a large clean energy project.
Mm.
And people are looking at what's called parametric insurance to hedge clean energy projects from climate change and physical risks. But parametric insurance can be expensive.
And then we get into the finance tension again of needing funding. I want to close off thinking about sort of in the next decade, do you think we have a climate technology today that could be truly transformative in the way that it's being implemented at the moment or that we're close to breaking through?
I'm not an expert on nuclear fusion, but Commonwealth Fusion Systems just published 5 scientific papers claiming they'll be able to produce more energy than they use. That would be a huge breakthrough if it works and can scale commercially.
I feel I'm always very skeptical when I hear that, because that sort of claim comes around every 5 years, saying it's 5 years from now.
Yeah, I agree. And it really depends on the region. The best overall technology for climate change is solar because it's the cheapest and there's so many places where there's plenty of sunlight. And the myth that solar doesn't work when the sun doesn't shine or the wind doesn't work when the wind doesn't blow, that's not really true because of improvements in smart grids and batteries.
So, for example, in England, where it's rainy 80% of the year, we could still have solar.
Yeah, they have some solar in England, and then they also have offshore wind power. They could do geothermal potentially. Geothermal looks very promising as well.
Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot to be excited about.
Geothermal seems to be working really well for like Greenland, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I don't remember which one either.
Good, okay. Well, thank you, Charles, for helping us understand all of that. As always, you can check out the blog at tangeliclife.org/Tangelic Talks, where we'll have some research that Charles has mentioned and some links to some of the things we've talked about and some extra questions because we're going to stay on for a little bit. But we'll catch you guys on the next one. Thank you.
Let's talk power, let's talk change. From rural lights to brighter days. Equity rising, voices strong. We're building tomorrow where we all belong. Tangelic Talks, energy, equity, pride. Empowering the world, side by side. A spark becomes a fire, a vision that's true. Together we rise, it starts with you.